Hello, everyone. Welcome to What CXOs Do Not Tell You, a series where I speak with bright and bold minds in the industry and academia. Listen to their perspectives. Views shared by the speakers are entirely personal.
Hello, everyone. Today we have Jose with us. Jose Roberto Alvarez is a seasoned technology leader with over 30 years of experience in semiconductor, edge computing, and embedded systems. He has held senior leadership roles at Intel, Broadcom, Xilinx, and Philips, guiding global R&D teams and contributing to groundbreaking advances in system-level design, video processing, and AI/ML applications. With over 55 patents, a venture partner with IG Capital, and founder of Clear Strategy, which is a boutique advisory firm, Jose played a pivotal role helping shape their technology strategy, growth for the startups, investors, and enterprises, navigating disruptive technologies in the Silicon Valley. I welcome Jose for our session today. You are a chief technology officer, a senior leader in the semiconductor industry with expertise in embedded systems, video technology industry. You have been with the large tech companies and had multiple successful startups in the Silicon Valley. What do you see are the main reasons of the technology talent clusters and they have worked so well in the Silicon Valley? Though we have seen some successes in other geographies, however, nothing succeeds as it has in San Francisco. So, what do you think? What's your view?
Well, first of all, I would just want to thank you for having me today. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you, and so it's a great honor to be here. So thank you. And yes, as you say, we have been very successful here in Silicon Valley in forwarding technology. And I think that it's a combination of many things, as you might suspect. And it goes back to a long, long time ago, believe it or not. Remember that, when the United States was forming, the West was basically wild. There was nothing in the West, so people started to move from the east of the United States, west of the country, and it required a special kind of people to move. It required the pioneers, those people that were really very bold and risk takers. So even from then, the West has, grown with very special kind of people. And so those came here west. And remember that in 1849, there was the gold rush. So again, that was really the very first, you know, uh, startup here in the valley. Thousands and thousands of people came here to the mountains in California to get gold. And so the gold rush, started, this part, San Francisco, to grow, which is a port. And as you well know, ports are very important in the world. And so move forward, to the 1950s after the war, the US government put a lot of effort here in Silicon Valley to build technology. Because remember that, the United States was mainly involved in the war with Japan, right? And so clearly the West became a very important shore for the United States. So then the government put a lot of effort into technology here in the United States. In fact, the neighborhood where I live was built for Lockheed engineers to
Mm.
have houses that were very near to Lockheed. And so so this is how things started to grow. Now we go back to today, right? And then we have very strong universities here in the United States, here in the West, very, very strong in the area. There's Stanford, there's UC Berkeley, there's Santa Clara University, there's San Jose States. These are, the engines of development in academics and beyond. And people think differently. But first, I'm jumping ahead of the story because remember that in the 60s, there was the counterculture of the hippies here in the Bay Area. And that, again, brought in people that thought that was thinking differently. They think completely different. And then there's the climate. And so there's these are the things that are very unique. And there's one more that I will tell you that will not surprise you, but again, is very unique here. So there's the, American West, there's the gold rush, there's the, US government after the war, there's the universities, there's the hippie counterculture, there's the climate that, we have a very temperate climate here in the Bay Area. And then finally, there's the venture capital community. That's one thing that, cannot be forgotten. And it's been a clear, dynamic force here in the Valley that it's not anywhere else. I mean, today, yes, I mean, there are many venture capitalist firms, throughout the United States, but in the very beginning, in the 50s and the 60s, when in fact Intel, well, Fairchild Semiconductors, which was the very first semiconductor company, was one of the first companies where employees felt like they could be bold enough to leave a company and then get funding from the outside without mortgaging their houses or getting loans and things like that. And so that really it's a big engine of risk, if you will. And so that even way back from Fairchild, Intel, the very first companies that got funded, with venture capital, that grew to what we have today. And so again, to summarize, those were, I think, in my personal view, the key aspects that make the Bay Area so unique.
You actually, it was very interesting that you went to the 1840s of gold rush, and the DNA is not something that got built in a day. It has been over a period in time that is coming up. Then you mentioned the US government. I think that role in the early days when things are shaping up is fundamentally very important because you need the support from larger agencies like government agencies. I am very intrigued when you talked about the third point, the hippie culture. Okay. Maybe I would like you to elaborate a little more. Universities, fundamentally very important. The young graduates, with dream in their eyes and ability to do new things. Uh, Another one, climate, venture capital, and of course the last one, being bold. I think the last one, the seventh one, and the sixth one are quite, I would say, complementary to each other. Ability to take risk at the employee and those who are starting this, both Fairchild and Story. At the same time, those who believe that those dreams are possible, the venture capitalist. You said hippie. How does that relate to? I'm a little interested to know about that from your perspective, Jose.
Well, you know that in the 60s, in the mid to late 60s, there was a counterculture movement of young people that thought differently, that they opposed, many things that were already part of the culture. And they had long hair, which until then, most people here in the United States have very short hair, wore hats, and they're very, very proper. And so they wore long hairs, and they advocated Eastern cultures, Hinduism and Buddhism. And so it was a shock to the rest of the country, and they dressed differently as well. They were free, and that created a local culture here of freedom, that it's okay to be different.
Mm,
That's the key. It's okay to be different. In many cultures, if you stick out, you're penalized. You're just different. You're not supposed to be different. You're supposed to be toe the line. But the
Mm,
hippies were revolutionaries in a way, and so they wanted to be different. And that sets a way of thinking that leads to not be risk averse. You're
mm,
willing to take risks. It's a really big risk, if you think about it, to stick out, to be different,
indeed.
to dress differently than everybody else. And
Right.
so that was a major cultural shift here in the Bay Area that again, it fueled all the other things that I mentioned before. And so it's all of these things that make the Bay Area so unique.
That's so unique. What it alludes to actually, you're saying the culture, the aspect of culture is fundamentally so important. And
Absolutely.
if you really think disruption, you have to think in a way to have boundaries being challenged differently, right? Good. So you brought some of the interesting context as we were discussing this about uh, the birth of this new kind of companies, Intel, Fairchild, all of that. Uh, Now they're known for innovations. They have been actually doing and bringing a lot of those innovations to the real world. During our discussion earlier as well, Jose, we have been talking about how companies look into these in Horizon 1, Horizon 2, and Horizon 3. Many are struck in Horizon 1, which is very natural. It's a whole cash cow syndrome. They feel that's a lot of aspect through which they're making money. And then some of them do make a very judicious transition and they try to replicate what is possible in the Horizon 2. However, when I was talking to you, you actually brought in very different perspective and which you have experienced on your own, where there is a lot happening in Horizon 3, which is not very common in other parts of the world where the startup culture is not so much, or I mean, in most of the companies per se, right? However, there is very little transition when they move from, for example, to Horizon 2, from 3 to 2, where they can monetize all these new ideas from those ideas which are into R&D. Uh, and it is very interesting, if you are talking to the CTOs, if you're talking to the entrepreneurs, how will you tell them to draw a balance between two and three? We will not talk about one, that's a traditional way of doing business. What do you think that they should think to draw that balance between two and three? And what could be the right kind of framework for them to succeed?
Yes, so that's a good question. But first, let's define what these horizons are. So basically, when you are a technologist, when you're a CTO, like I've been, you want to plan the future of technology development for
Mm,
your company. And so that forces you to think ahead, obviously. And these are the horizons, this is what you see ahead. And so, as you said, the horizon one is all about the short term, let's
mm,
say 1 to 2 years. That's that's what most people agree with. And horizon two is anything beyond 2 to 4 years or thereabouts. And horizon three is what's beyond four, four to however you want to look at it. And
mm,
so, as you said, clearly, horizon one, it's all about the now. It's about, increasing your efficiency, increasing your profits, the exploitation of what you have
correct,
right now.
correct.
The horizon three is more about exploration. And
Mm,
so those are the two contrasting things. But you're right that in the middle, there's that horizon two. And that's where many people get stuck. Where horizon two is about, okay, how do we use synergies that we have to go to the next step? It's about, next level customer adoption, next level traction, if you will. And so Horizon 3 is all about innovation. Of course,
mm,
everything is about innovation in the end, right? But it's really, looking forward. And so there's there's an issue because what I have seen is that many companies that are bold enough to have programs for Horizon 3, and you have to be bold because one of the key success factors, in my opinion, is that you have to have dedicated budgets for Horizon 3. Because what, in my experience, if you don't have that, if it's part of the portfolio management, then usually there's going to be something that comes up that it's more important in the short term, and you're going to be defunded for your Horizon 3 efforts. That has been my experience. And so it's very important that if you have innovation, long-term innovation, you have the dedicated budget. So that's number one. So it requires a cultural thinking, a cultural shift that has to start from the very top, from the executive level. So what I have seen is that many companies that are bold enough to take that step usually do not um, create those Horizon 3 projects with the explicit path to Horizon 2 and to Horizon 1, meaning how are we going to make a product that will eventually be our core? Because, eventually Horizon 3 becomes a product that becomes Horizon 1, right?
Right.
And so there's traveling between Horizon 3 to Horizon 1. And also the other problem is that when you have a Horizon 2 project, you don't think of the next step. And so that's where people get stuck, where
Mm.
you don't think of, okay, we're now trying to leverage things, but how can we leverage the technology that we have so that we can grow? And so you have to maybe look at Horizon 2 as incubator. So not necessarily dedicated, but as an incubator to Horizon 3. So you have one, you have Horizon 2, and that could be the incubator to Horizon 3. And I think that that's in a nutshell how I think about it.
Yeah, see, this is interesting, and thanks for explaining all the three horizon for our viewers. What's very interesting is that they are not linear. If we really want to think of the S curves of disruption that's happening, they plow back. They are required to feed. So, for example, there are different metrics that people and companies use. 25% or X% of my revenue should be coming from new innovation over last 3 years, what has been getting done. Those kind of way in which people start defining how this horizon level 3 innovation should really start monetizing, and that's where you start experimenting them in horizon 2 so that it becomes a horizon 1 product for tomorrow or a horizon 1 service for tomorrow, right? So having said that, this is how traditionally business would do and succeed. But we have seen, for example, there are typical examples from Palo Alto to elsewhere where people are very good in innovation. A lot of innovation happening in Horizon 3, but they do not move out from the drawing board to something which is at the factory floor or to something which gets converted to a product and service. What do you think is the main reason? Is it because they feel they're ahead of the curve or they feel the acceptance? What are the major challenges? Or is it the funding and the priorities of now that is actually stopping them to think differently, Jose?
Well, I think that it starts with mindset,
Okay.
really, and mindset and culture.
Mm.
Culture, this is a theme that you will hear from me a lot, you know, because I truly believe that, as a technologist, we tend to think of, well, technology, but, culture has a lot to do with how we uh, develop and make that technology real for things that are useful to the world. And so it starts with that cultural shift where, people say things like, well, you should be afraid to fail.
Mhm.
And that's really it's really hard. It's really hard for
Right.
some people to fail because
Right.
all of our education from kindergarten to university, you have to get grades, right?
Mm,
And grades means that you have to answer all the questions right. You cannot answer a question wrong because guess what? Then you're not going to get the grades, which means that you're not going to pass the exam, which means that you're not going to get admitted to the right university at the right time. And so it's drilled in our minds that you must be right. You must be right. If you're wrong, you're punished. And that's really, I think, the first hurdle that we need to overcome.
mm,
That it's okay to fail, but you learn. And so you have to look at failure as learning. It's just that out of university, your learning is no longer from books and things. Your learning is from your own failures. That's really the mental shift that leads to the cultural shift because also this has to be within the company, right? In many cases, in companies, they say it's okay to fail, you can fail. But then if your project does not succeed, maybe you won't get the bonus that you were expecting. Maybe you will not get the rewards that you were expecting. So there's that inherent fear
right.
of failure for many, many, many ways. So you have to think about it in, how when you're in university, you pay tuition, you pay to be in the university itself. So the tuition is money, right? But then when you are in the job market, then the tuition is really how you can learn from failure. So it's that you're learning that's what you pay basically. And if you're not failing, that means you're not pushing hard enough. That's really what innovation is about. Innovation about just curiosity, is about, boldness, is about cleverness. Yes, 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 all of that. But it's about learning how to fail
Mm,
fail quickly and then pivot. And a lot of the times we don't accept our own failures. Because it's hard, right? It's hard to do that. But you have to be able to be honest with yourself and say, you know what? Yep, this is the time to change.
yeah,
And then you
this
move
is a
forward.
excellent point. See, the point is that you were talking about the startup and the culture, the hippie culture, and all the different things of the risk-taking ability of people, the venture capitalist. I think that particular DNA, is it that the large organization, which are already in path of success, is it that they need to possess it differently? Again, that's a question of exploration versus exploitation. An organization does have both these arms if a large organization is required to. But at the same point in time, since they're part and connected with the same umbilical cord, right, being in the same organization,
Right.
how much is that ability, the whole culture aspect, the aspect of the risk taking ability, and who is the venture capitalist there? Every project needs to be funded. As you said, it gets defunded because the priority sometimes becomes now, right? So the question then remains is how that now priority remains intact. At the same point in time, the exploration doesn't get, I should say, defunded, which means the fail fast approach should happen of a startup in those areas as well, right?
Right. And I think that goes back to what we mentioned earlier about, Horizon 3 projects. Horizon 3 projects that are just, well, for lack of a better phrase, pie in the sky,
Mm,
uh, can fail and be left alone because they didn't have a clear path from that Horizon 3 to the Horizon 2 to the Horizon 1, meaning there's no clear benefit to the company, to the organization. And that's what we need to think about carefully when we look at Horizon 3 projects in a corporation, right? Because it's like being a startup.
correct.
Nobody is going to fund your startup if you don't have a way to a product that will help people. Because in
Agree.
the end, it's all about providing something that is useful to people,
Absolutely. See,
right?
actually, the point here is not about the three horizons alone. As you are bringing this point, it is more about what is a more acceptable and available solution for people. Whether you provide that through your own research, through alliance, or through a different means where you have a better, I would say, a startup or a company or group of people doing it, and acquire and provide it to the market and customer who need it. That's the aspect of innovation, which means it could be both internal and external, uh, as a way forward to go, because we may not be able to do everything within our organization itself, right? So I think this explains this part well.
What one more
Yes,
comment
please.
that I thought about while you were
Sure.
summarizing. It's, we as executives, we need to think about, um, I mentioned earlier that, being part of a portfolio management for products in a Horizon 3 project it's not always a good idea because your product portfolio will always win against something that it's going to be, in 4 to 5 years in the future.
Hmm.
However, as technology executives, as CTOs, we need to think about it, technology from a portfolio perspective, meaning we need to have a portion of things that are near term, midterm, and long term. And that's usually a lot of companies do, 50% is Horizon 1,
Hmm.
30% is Horizon 2, and then the last 20% is Horizon 3. So we need to think about in a portfolio way, meaning that you need to basically hedge our bets in creating these new technologies as well.
Agree, agree. Uh, you have been bringing the whole construct of technology now in last few moments as we have been discussing. And as we are discussing technology now, the big disruptor, which is everybody is talking about, everybody is experimenting with, everybody is spending billions and hundreds of billions of dollars today, is the new, I would say new, which has been there for almost more than 3 decades, the whole AI and the new avatar of AI, which is bringing those kind of big disruption. Now, uh, we have been talking to different people, enterprise, the young engineers and students. Uh, it has been very different for them who are just coming out of the universities and colleges, let's assume 25 something. And imagine if I try to imagine myself and I pose a question to you, Jose, how do you think that I, as 25 something, should see myself doing things 3 years down the line? If I try to make it a little more challenging for you, maybe 5 to 10 years down the line, what do you think? How do you see young engineers, or I would say entrepreneurs, look at things in this time of interesting, challenging, new things happening?
Yes, I mean that that is the big question, right? And so if you're a young engineer just graduating or in your first few years in the job market, it today it's an incredible time to be here because everything is changing, and so that could be disconcerting, obviously. But it goes back to that thinking, right? That you need to first change your way of thinking, that what made you successful in getting good grades is not necessarily what's going to make you successful in succeeding in the industry. You have to take risks. You have to learn how to do that. And like everything else, you learn little by little. Just if you look at a baby learning to walk, there's a lot of falling.
Mm,
You have a small, toddler, they fall a lot. And we tend to ignore that, that's exactly how you learn. Just sometimes a little, and then you keep on learning until well, finally you learn how to walk and then you learn how to run. And so fundamentally, that's what you have to look at it. But more specifically, right? I mean, I think that young people should concentrate on the fundamentals. What is the fundamental problem here? The whys in the hows, if you will. Why is this so? Be curious. Why and how can it be made better? And then once you do that, then you go one layer. Okay, then why is this, and how can it become better? And so starting from fundamentals is very, very important, extremely important. Learn how the fundamentals are. Number one. Number two, learn how systems work. Not just a little piece of the puzzle, but how does the whole thing work? And it's not an easy question, but now we have so many tools out there that can help you get to the bottom of things. Um, and just how does the system work? How does that end-to-end system work? And then, yes, even though people are saying, don't learn to code, no, don't listen to those people. Learn to code. Be good at it.
Okay.
Don't listen to people that are saying, coding is dead. Humans should not code. No, 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 no. Don't listen to that. You know why? Because coding forces you to think logically, to think critically, to think in systems, to think of mistakes. One of the complaints about, coding tools now is that, yeah, you could generate a piece of code, but how do you test it? How do you make it, sure that it's not going to fail in the field? And then you have to make sure that that code works. And of course, you could use the same AI tools that wrote the code to test the code, no question about it. But you need to know yourself. You need to know. And so coding gives you that, strength, if you will,
Mm.
to do that. And build things that break, right? I mean, and fix them. Because that's the thing. I mean, if you always get something that is always going to work, you're never going to know because, as I was saying earlier, one of the best things that you could do is to fail and you learn from the failure and you move forward. And again, if you don't code yourself, if you don't make your own mistakes, you never will really learn the fundamentals of what it is that you're trying to solve. And so get comfortable with that. Get comfortable with, making a mistake, fixing it, making a mistake, fixing it, and so on and so forth. And the other thing that I would recommend, people that are young going into the workforce is that we as engineers, as technologists, we tend to, of course, because of the educational system, put a lot of effort in, science, math, physics, chemistry, mechanics, and things like that, right? Hardcore engineering things. And we, and me included, we tend to say, literature, bah, I don't want literature. I don't want to read literature book. Philosophy, no, I don't like that. That's useless. Psychology, well, don't want to do that. Nope. Also, that's a mistake because what's going to become more and more important, we as humans need to learn to communicate, need to learn to tell stories. And that is really what ties it all together. If you, most people that are very successful in, well, in life, but specifically in technology and business, are those that can communicate clearly and they can tell a good story. And a story doesn't mean that you're telling something that doesn't exist. No, 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 no. It's just communicating to executives. Why should I invest in you? Why should I do this project? Well, let me tell you a story of how this actually should develop. That's something that we engineers, I'm generalizing, obviously, but I'm generalizing from my own mistakes that I really didn't like the humanities when I was young, and that was a mistake. And it took me a long time to recover from that mistake, but now I see, all of those things that are um, the soft areas are actually the most important now because that's what makes you human, and that's what will help you communicate with humans. And so that I think that's what, in a nutshell, what I think young people should concentrate on.
Now I put back and try to summarize what I take away as a 25-year-old now. Okay. I think fundamentally, the first point is so important that the fundamentals do not change. Know your fundamentals. I need to know my fundamentals well. The second aspect is that, yes, there are pieces which are puzzles, but look into the whole, still look into the puzzle, and that's where the larger picture will emerge from you. I like the last point very much. It has been my personal learning as well. STEM, and I thought, oh, history is history. It is something from past, and literature, which is fiction, is not for me. But let me tell you, and this has fundamentally made a big difference. Now I read a lot of history. If you think in a very tactical way, that it is helping you to tell a story. That ability to tell a story, whether with numbers, without numbers, but that is fundamental. I think as a youngster, if I'm looking at myself, it's still relevant with all these points. Thank you. It has been a wonderful session, good exchange of ideas, and I believe 25 something of me will learn something from what you just mentioned, Jose.
Well, again, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Amit. And again, thank you for having me.
Thank you for your time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, Jose. Take care.
Likewise.
Bye.